Welcome, Age of Vintage Society. If I had to name the most beautiful and stylish actress ever, it would be neither Audrey Hepburn nor the young Elizabeth Taylor, and certainly not Grace Kelly. It would be Lilli Palmer. I suspect that few who are not avid cineasts will remember her. Her international career didn't last long enough for the following generations to remember. Why was Lilli Palmer nearly arrested by the German authorities? Make sure to watch the video until the end and leave your thoughts in the comments. If you are new here, join our wonderful community by subscribing to the Age of Vintage channel. Lilli Palmer, the refugee who starred alongside Fred Astaire and Clark Gable. There was never any doubt in my mind that I would become an actress, Lilli Palmer wrote in her autobiography. Defying the wish of her physician father, Alfred Pizer, that she'd study medicine, Palmer fulfilled her own prophecy by following instead in the footsteps of her mother, actor Rose Lisman. Palmer became not only a prominent actor in numerous successful plays, films and television programs, but also a painter and an author of both fiction and non-fiction. A woman of broad interests, Lilli Palmer was an important film and stage actress in the United States and Europe in the 3 decades following World War II. As both a successful performer in her own right, as well as the wife of renowned actor Rex Harrison, she was an acquaintance and sometimes friend and confidant to many leading figures in the arts and international society of her time, including Helen Keller, Noel Coward and George Bernard Shaw. Despite her later achievements as a young German woman and aspiring actress of Jewish extraction, Lilli Palmer found her life entangled with some of the most tragic and painful events of the 20th century. Her years as a refugee and her subsequent return to Germany loomed large in her own assessment of her life. Few international stars were as sophisticated, elegant and popular as Lilli Palmer in a career that stretched from the 30s to the 80s, taking in periods of stardom in English, American and European films. Romy Schneider would be a comparable case in the 60s and 70s. During the heyday of her marriage to Rex Harrison, they were one of the main theatrical couples of the era, entertaining everybody from Churchill and the Duke and Duchess of Windsor at their home in Portofino, Italy, and she was also involved in the Carol Landis scandal and Rex's marriage to the ailing Kay Kendall. She fled Germany after her theatre contracts were revoked and she was branded a non-Aryan and narrowly escaped arrest. Like many forced into exile when Hitler came to power in 1933, Lilli Palmer had forged a new life for herself a long way from home. Hers had been a successful one, a screen acting career, starring opposite the likes of Fred Astaire, Gary Cooper and Clark Gable, that made her a household name across the world. Yet here was the legacy of her enforced departure still thrumming away at the core of her being, the question of whether behind the smiles and greetings she was, to them, just another Jew. A charming, elegant and exceedingly popular international film star with a gentle, understated beauty, actress Lilli Palmer was born as Lilli Marie Pizer on May 24, 1914 in Posen, Prussia. She had 2 sisters, Irene and Hilda. As she later wrote in her memoirs, she was reminded in her childhood only once a year that she was Jewish, when she was discouraged from participating in the school Christmas play. But she acted in many other performances at the open-air school in Berlin-Grunwald, where she already took the stage name of Palmer, who was a friend and colleague of her mother, and secured a contract with the well-reputed Darmstadt State Theatre upon graduation from drama school. After Hitler came to power in 1933, Palmer soon faced grave reminders of her Jewish heritage. She thought back more than 2 decades to her last acting engagement in Germany. Palmer was 18 in 1933, a promising member of a repertory company in Darmstadt, who had just accepted a 2-year contract at a prestigious Frankfurt theatre that was cancelled within weeks of Hitler coming to power. When she broke the news to her kindly landlady, who collected her copy of the official German party newspaper, Völkischer Beobachter, from the mailbox early every morning before Palmer saw it, the old woman commiserated. "It's a real shame," she sighed. Hitler is a good man who will undoubtedly make Germany a great nation again. It's just unfortunate he has this thing about the Jews." Shortly afterwards, Palmer was due to open in a performance of When the Young Wine Blossoms in Darmstadt. Hours before the premiere, the director received word that 25 stormtroopers would be commandeering the front row because they'd heard the company was employing a Jewish actress. It might, thought the director, be enough to deter that evening's unwelcome visitors. As Palmer waited nervously on the stage for the curtain to go up, the actress with whom she was supposed to hold hands for the opening scene snatched hers away and unleashed a torrent of whispered anti-Semitic invective before spitting on the ground at her feet. Then the curtain rose and Palmer glanced beyond the glare of the lights. Where she had expected a line of brown uniforms and 25 pairs of eyes drilling their contempt into her, the front row was completely empty. Her recently negotiated contract was cancelled. Branded a non-Aryan, she came near to being arrested by local German authorities during a performance. After a harrowing opening before rows of stormtroopers, Palmer was spared at the last minute when they learned of the World War I Iron Cross medal earned by her father. Alfred Preiser was a leading surgeon at Berlin's largest Jewish hospital, who was 4 years running a field hospital at Verdun. Her father's war record had been enough to see the stormtroopers withdrawn 15 minutes before the performance. She was safe for now. Palmer's refugee tale ended better than most. "I wasn't in a concentration camp, I wasn't violated, I was so lucky," she said. "When I got that kick in the behind from Hitler, I thought it was the tragedy of my life, but it was the luck of my life." For all her success, however, the cold fear of what lay on the other side of that Darmstadt curtain never left her, nor the suspicion that behind the smiling eyes of colleagues, hateful, vicious invective could only be a whisper away. These events forced Palmer into exile, the first year of which she spent in Paris. Hindered by linguistic, cultural and bureaucratic barriers, Palmer and her sister Irene barely scraped by with performances at the Moulin Rouge and at nightclubs. But Palmer was able to establish connections which led to a screen test in London, where she landed a part in her first film, Crime Unlimited. Soon she signed a contract with the Gaumont British Film Company, and after various hurdles in obtaining work permits in England, she was eventually granted a permanent permit, lending some security to her life in exile. In London, Palmer met one of the greatest influences, Elsa Schreiber, considered by many to be a mediocre actor, but a marvellous acting teacher. Schreiber taught her the subtleties of refining a character and a script, a method which later brought Palmer into conflict with some of her directors, and helped Palmer with her roles for years to come. She was a regular face on British screens until the outbreak of the Second World War saw another contract cancellation. She found work in a touring theatre company, making her British stage debut at a small theatre in Birmingham. Staying in the same hotel was the cast of a Noel Coward play being staged in the city, and the actors would dine together after their productions, among them Rex Harrison, Palmer's future husband, their first date taking place over a powdered egg omelette. She had suddenly ended a long-standing relationship with Rolf Gerard, a painter and medical student. Married with a young son, Harrison was separated from his first wife, Marjorie Thomas. Their courtship coincided with the early portion of World War II, and both were witnesses to the Battle of Britain. Driving around the countryside near London, they looked up to see British and German fighter planes battling for control of the sky. With his help, she obtained desirable roles in the English theatre. The two appeared together in plays given in morning and afternoon performances, designed to take place when German bombers were least likely to attack. In January 1943, Harrison and Palmer were married, and shortly thereafter Lilli discovered she was pregnant. She continued as a film actress during her pregnancy, but the war was a constant factor in her life. As an enemy alien in wartime Britain, the young actress was refused permission to drive an ambulance. She was restricted in the distance she could travel from home without police permission, and she had to be at home by midnight. There was personal danger as well. In 1943, a bomb landed in her garden, levelling her home and causing her a minor injury in the form of a cut wrist, but leaving her pregnancy unaffected. A few months later, her baby, a son named Rex Carey Alfred, was born in the midst of the great incendiary bombing raid of February 19, 1944. Less than 4 months later, a German V2 bomb landed outside the Harrisons' home in Buckinghamshire. Carey, who was in a baby carriage on the house's terrace, survived the blast only because he was sheltered by a mass of shrubbery. Harrison was released from service in the RAF in 1944, and the two of them began touring to entertain Allied troops. Immediately after World War II, Palmer accompanied her husband to the United States, where he was to star in an adaptation of Margaret Landon's book Anna and the King of Siam. Palmer was cast to star opposite Gary Cooper in the film Cloak and Dagger, a story of World War II espionage in which she played an Italian resistance fighter. Her career was overshadowed by her husband's, however. Anna and the King of Siam became a notable hit, while Cloak and Dagger was a critical and box office failure. The two foreigners soon found their initial encounter with the American movie community, as well as the surrounding curiosity of American journalism, personally unsettling. In the mid-1940s she arrived on Broadway and in Hollywood with Rex Harrison, and was instantly transformed into a leading lady. She starred in Broadway productions as Anne of 1,000 Days, The Four Poster, and Bell, Book and Candle, and in such films as Fritz Lang's 1946 production Cloak and Dagger, and the 1947 melodrama Body and Soul with John Garfield. Her best Hollywood production was the film version of The Four Poster, in which she co-starred again with Harrison, and strongly showed what would become the key to her following international success: worldliness and sophistication, plus a bewitching sense of humour. She returned to Germany in 1954 for the musical comedy Feuerwerk, in which she performed a magic rendition of the already popular song O Mein Papa, and showed the world that she could sing as well. She further reinforced her reputation as a top international star, and from that time she alternated between European and American-made films. Lilli wasn't spared the dark side of the glamour. After a scandal in which starlet Carol Landis committed suicide, supposedly because of her doomed love of Lilli's husband Rex Harrison, their marriage deteriorated. About that, Lilli wrote later in her biography, "What does one wear to the funeral of one's husband's mistress?" Harrison, a notorious philanderer, had an affair with British actress Kay Kendall, and divorced Lilli to marry the terminally ill Kendall, with hopes of a remarriage to Palmer after Kay's death, but that never came to pass. He later decreed that after his death part of his ashes should be spread on Lilli's grave, and so it happened. Palmer once noted that she wanted to be remembered simply as a person who had led an interesting life. The varied activities undertaken in the last few decades of her life only increased her chances of this commemoration. She began to pursue more seriously her hobby of painting, even receiving advice and encouragement from the renowned painter Oskar Kokoschka. An exhibit at London's Tooth Gallery showcased 25 of Palmer's paintings, most of which were sold on the spot. Palmer also displayed her writing talents in a witty and best-selling autobiography, Change Lobsters and Dance, as well as 4 novels and a short story collection. Gradually decelerating her movie-making, Palmer began work in another popular medium, television. In 1972 she acted in a German comedy, A Woman Remains a Woman, for which she won a Golden Camera Award. She also did much of the show's writing under the pseudonym of her grandfather's name, Herman Lissman. Palmer soon became a familiar television personality. In 1958, Lilli married Argentinian actor heartthrob Carlos Thompson, later to become a serious writer, to whom she stayed married until her death, and the marriage was said to be inordinately happy. Thompson committed suicide in 1990, supposedly because he couldn't get over the loss of his wife. Lilli Palmer's last work was not in film, but in the TV miniseries Peter the Great in 1986, where she starred together with, among others, Maximilian Schell, Vanessa Redgrave, Omar Sharif, Trevor Howard and Laurence Olivier. She died from cancer on 27th of January that same year, aged 71. Life had been kind to her, at least in one respect. Germany's most beautiful daughter remained beautiful until the end. If you liked this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you are new here, and if you want to support my work, please visit my Patreon page. Lilli Palmer has certainly not had a cliched life, we can say that. But she was not the only one with a difficult life. Watch my video and find out why was Joanna Moore's life an often chaotic ride through hell.